Hi, I'm Kaylin. My parents once called me the family disgrace. At Thanksgiving, they toasted to my sister's success and handed me a name tag that read, The Disappointment. They said I'd never build anything. But what they didn't know was that I'd already built everything they were standing on. And when my portfolio manager called them, they didn't laugh. They froze. Before we dive in, what time are you listening to this and where from? Drop a comment below. I read every single one. I pulled into the gravel lot 10 minutes past 2. The sun filtered through the Spanish moss, casting slow shadows across the entrance of the country club in Savannah. A familiar dread curled in my stomach as I adjusted my coat and reached for the envelope that had arrived last week. No return address, just my name in block letters. Kaylin. Inside, I'd found a folded invitation. Vague, no greeting, just the words. Family Celebration Luncheon. Sunday at 2 p.m. I had no idea what we were celebrating. No one had told me. As I stepped into the lobby, the air shifted. Polished shoes clicked across marble, and the sound of laughter came muffled through heavy double doors. No one looked up as I entered. A teenage hostess at the reception desk barely glanced at me before reaching under the table and handing me a name tag. I looked down. Kaylin. The disappointment. My fingers trembled. A flush rose in my neck. But I didn't flinch. I peeled the backing and stuck the label on my blouse right over my heart. If that's who they still thought I was, so be it. Inside the banquet hall, the lights were bright. The room buzzed with the easy confidence of people who believed they belonged. My brothers were there. Tall, polished, laughing too loud. My sisters wrapped in floral prints and matching manicures were already deep into a toast. I found an empty seat tucked behind the dessert table. No place card, no glass of wine. Just a folded napkin and a view of everyone's backs. When they raised their glasses to our achievers, I didn't hear my name. Of course not. The toasts went on. One for Ava's third promotion this year, another for Mason's real estate breakthrough in Miami. Guess Kaylin made it this time, someone murmured behind me. Probably just came for the free shrimp. A brittle laugh followed. I didn't turn around. My mother stood at the far end of the room wearing pearls and that same worn smile she saved for church and charity galas. Our eyes met for a moment. Her gaze flicked down to my tag. Then she looked away. Like I was a smudge she didn't have the energy to wipe off. I needed air. Outside, the autumn breeze rolled in soft and salty from the marshes. I sat on a low stone wall, letting the silence settle around me. I thought about the debt I'd cleared for them. Twice. The emergencies I'd paid for quietly. The birthdays I'd never been invited to again after my business failed. It hadn't even really failed. It had paused. I had paused. But no one cared about nuance. They cared about image. I touched the name tag. My fingers pinched the edge, peeled it slowly. I held it in my palm like a wound. Years ago, my business professor had said I had the sharpest market instinct he'd seen in years. You see 10 steps ahead, he'd said. Never forget that. I had. I let their voices get louder than mine. Just then my phone buzzed. I blinked down at the screen. Portfolio 9.3% quarterly ROI. Would you like to schedule your update? I stared at it. Did I want to? I pocketed the phone without replying and walked back inside. Still, no one greeted me. Still, no one offered me a plate or poured me a drink. But this time, I didn't sit in the corner. I stood by the fireplace next to a print of the Savannah River Walk and watched them. I let the noise wash over me unbothered. Their words couldn't reach me anymore. Something had shifted, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like the disappointment. I hadn't told them what I'd built. Not yet, but it was coming. The clinking of forks on porcelain filled the banquet hall like a dull metallic heartbeat. I returned to my table, the one still wedged behind the dessert trays and wilting floral arrangements. I moved the spoon aside and poked half-heartedly at the cold chicken breast on my plate. Conversations swirled around me, none directed toward me. It was like being inside a snow globe, on display, encased, but untouched. Then came the toast. To success, my brother Derek declared, standing tall near the head table. To careers that take grit, not luck. To those of us who actually work for a living. Laughter claps, wine glasses raised like trophies. And to Kaylin, my mother chimed in just a beat too loud. May the food stamps always come in on time. The table erupted, that dry, performative laugh people do when they're pretending it's all in good fun. It sliced through me in a way even silence couldn't. I didn't smile. I didn't flinch. I stood, excused myself without a word, and walked out. The restroom smelled of lavender and bleach. I locked myself in the last stall, sat on the closed lid, and stared at the tiled floor until the buzzing in my ears stopped. Then I pulled out my phone. There it was again. Would you like to schedule a private review? The text from my portfolio manager still waiting unanswered. I stared at it, not because I didn't know the answer, but because this moment reminded me where it all began. Austin, 5 years ago. I was in a cramped studio with walls thin enough to hear my upstairs neighbor microwave his leftovers. The only light came from the tiny kitchen window. My fridge was half empty, rent paid, but nothing left over. I had $500 to my name. No one was calling. No one was checking in. My parents had stopped returning my calls after I left law school. My siblings treated my silence like failure. I sat on the floor with my laptop cross-referencing biotech filings, poring over startup registries. I'd found a small company, one with barely a pulse in the market, but promising science, and a CEO who answered her own emails. I wired the $500. My roommate at the time said I was nuts. You could have stretched that for groceries. I didn't argue. I just watched, waited. It tripled in 18 months, then tripled again. I reinvested everything. No vacations, no shoes that weren't secondhand. I lived like a ghost in my own life. By the 3rd year, I wasn't broke anymore. I was managing portfolios quietly for cautious clients. I built it from shadows, all under their radar. I never told them. Why would I? They wouldn't have believed me even if I'd handed them the statements. Back in the banquet hall, the lighting had dimmed. Candles flickered. My seat had been taken. By someone's purse, apparently. I stood watching. Ava passed by, her voice coated in sweetness and smug. Still not married? She asked, smiling like she was helping. Not yet, I replied. You. Her smile twitched. 3rd time's the charm, she said, and disappeared into the crowd. I didn't move. I wasn't embarrassed. Not anymore. Across the room, my father busied himself with his phone. My mother was radiant beside Mason, her perfect son with 3 houses and 2 ex-wives. I looked down at my shoes. Clean, practical, not cheap. My dress tailored, subtle. The tag scratched slightly where I hadn't cut it clean, a reminder I still bought things on sale. But my bank account didn't need clearance racks anymore. The numbers glowed behind my eyes. My first $8,000, then $40,000, then 6 figures before I even blinked. I had built something they couldn't see, and that was my armor. They had laughed at the wrong person. There was a time I thought their approval would fix me. I was wrong. After dessert was cleared and the candles had burned halfway down their wicks, I found myself wandering under the pretense of helping an older guest with her coat. Mrs. Langston, my father's longtime colleague's widow, was seated near the stage and struggling to stand. I smiled, offered her my arm, and slowly walked her toward the entrance. As we neared the floral arch behind the podium, she patted my hand and said, "Sweet girl, they don't see you, but I do." I blinked, caught off guard. She stepped away, and I turned only to freeze. Behind the flower-covered column, I heard my parents' voices. "She's quiet enough not to embarrass us," my mother said, her voice clipped, but relaxed, like she was commenting on the weather. My father let out a low chuckle. Let's be honest. She makes us look generous like we didn't throw her away. There was no gasp, no dramatic reaction, just stillness. I didn't breathe. I couldn't. Somewhere in the room, a fork dropped. Laughter bubbled at another table. Glasses clinked. But all I heard were those two sentences sitting heavy in the hollow between my ribs. I turned, slowly walked straight out into the cool Georgia air, and crossed the terrace until I reached the fountain near the garden wall. The stone edge was slick from the evening dew, but I sat anyway. My hands rested on my lap, unmoving. There was a time I thought if I just tried hard enough, earned enough, endured enough, they'd see me, that I'd finally be enough. But I remembered now. That was a lie I'd buried in a cap and gown. It had been 12 years since that graduation day. The auditorium was packed. My name, Kaylin Louise Redden, was etched on the program beside valedictorian. I stood on the edge of the platform, clutching my speech, scanning the crowd for my parents. They sat in the second row. My brothers flanked them. My sister wore pearls and eye rolls. My father, invited to speak as a legacy donor, stepped up first. He smiled, thanked the university, praised the family values that brought his sons through medical school, finance, and engineering. He said nothing about me, not my name, not my degree, not even and our daughter. After the ceremony, I asked my mother why. She patted my shoulder like it was a broken vase. He meant you too. Don't make a scene. That was the day I stopped hoping. I stopped waiting to be seen. I didn't disappear. I just learned to make myself useful in ways they couldn't monitor. I became invisible where it hurt and undeniable where it counted. I leaned forward and let my fingers skim the water of the fountain. They still didn't see me, but that didn't mean I was lost. I thought of the first client I ever took on, Mrs. Letitia Corbin, a retired librarian who'd inherited a modest estate from her sister and didn't trust her children to manage it. I trust you, she'd said, gripping my hand. Because you listen. You don't talk over people like they're stupid. I'd cried in the parking lot after that meeting, not because I was overwhelmed, but because someone finally saw the part of me I liked best. Her trust wasn't misplaced. That portfolio tripled in value over 4 years. Letitia sent me a Christmas card every year since, with a handwritten note inside. My clients talked about me in boardrooms, in referral circles, in legal summits. They didn't care that my father thought I was a cautionary tale. They knew what I delivered. And I did it all without asking for a single word of praise from people who couldn't remember my graduation. I stood up and smoothed my dress, walking back inside, as if I hadn't just had my stomach gutted and stitched back together in the dark. Inside, the room had shifted. The band had started up a softer melody. People were dancing now. Ava twirled near the head table with her second husband. Or third. I lost count. As I passed, she glanced over and whispered to someone beside her. She's still sitting alone. I didn't react. I wasn't alone. Not really. I found my seat, picked up the small chocolate mousse they'd left during my absence, and took a bite. No one looked my way. No one noticed that I'd come back different, but I didn't need them to. I stared down at the linen napkin folded beside my plate, at the silverware that caught the soft light at the stem of the glass, still half full beside me. And I thought, I don't need them to say my name. I'll make sure the world does. It started with the clink of a glass. I was still seated, still chewing what had to be the driest slice of lemon tart ever plated, when my father rose and cleared his throat. The room fell into that strange hush that families only manage during speeches or fights. He raised his champagne flute. Thank you all for being here tonight. It means the world to our family. Tonight, we celebrate resilience, legacy, brilliance. I glanced around. My brothers leaned in with pride. My sister adjusted her dress and beamed. My mother placed a steadying hand on his arm, like the moment was too tender to bear alone. Then came the hit. We're proud to announce the formation of the Leora Family Fund, a $2 million investment initiative focused on long-term family prosperity, managed under Leora's name. There was a beat. Applause, whistles, glasses lifted. I blinked. The tart stuck to the roof of my mouth. I didn't move. I didn't clap. My mother leaned over, still smiling. Don't make this about you. A second later, my phone buzzed. A text from my older brother. Just clap. The tablecloth suddenly looked like snow. All white. No feeling. Just cold. I stood slowly and murmured something about the restroom, though I doubt anyone heard. My chair barely made a sound as I stepped away. The hallway smelled like lilies and polished silver. I passed the coat check, ignored a waiter offering espresso, and paused by the event coordinator's table. A stack of glossy brochures sat near the edge, pre-pressed samples for the family fund. Curiosity, or maybe a gut instinct I'd learned to trust, made me reach for one. I flipped it open. Then the world slowed. The charts, mine. The terminology, mine. Even the phrasing of the investment philosophy. I'd written that sentence 6 months ago for an internal presentation to a private client group using anonymized biotech projections. The entire framework had been lifted. No credit. My father was listed as chair. Leora, of course, was the managing visionary. I stared at the page like it might rewrite itself. Nothing did. I held the brochure for a moment longer before placing it back in the stack, perfectly aligned. As I re-entered the banquet hall, Leora was already mid-toast. Her voice rang bright and practiced. This fund reflects everything our family stands for. Collaboration, discipline, and a shared legacy we all contribute to. I made my way back to the table. No one looked my way. They were too busy raising their glasses. I sat, folded my hands on my lap, and stared at the half-melted ice in my untouched water glass. My knuckles tightened, fingers going pale. No one noticed. Not when I didn't lift my glass. Not when I didn't smile. Not when I stayed still through the applause like a wax figure in someone else's museum. I let the sounds of celebration roll past me like a tide. They'd stolen my work, repackaged it under her name, and smiled as if nothing had happened. The ash taste returned, not from the dessert, but from betrayal. Sharp, coated in silence. I waited until the clapping faded, until the music returned, until the lights dimmed just enough that I could slip away again. Quiet, invisible, as always. In the restroom, I closed the stall door behind me and dialed without hesitation. A click, then a familiar voice. Madeline, my assistant, answered. I need every file we shared with Dad's team, I said, keeping my voice low. Every deck, every draft, every time-stamped doc. I could hear her fingers already tapping at her keyboard. Send them to my private inbox. Tonight. A pause. Everything okay? I looked at the reflection in the mirror. My lipstick was still intact. My hair perfect. My eyes steady. Cold. No, I said, but it will be. I think they just declared war. By the time the sun filtered through the moss-covered oaks lining my parents' neighborhood, my decision was made. I didn't tell anyone I was coming. I didn't have to. The anger didn't need an audience, only a direction. The morning air was cooler than I expected, laced with that faint, dew-soaked scent of old porches and rotting pine mulch. Their front door looked exactly the same, like it always did, like nothing had happened. No one answered when I knocked, so I used the old brass key. It still worked. Inside the house felt untouched by time. Same floral rug, same framed portraits of Leora's achievements hanging above the fireplace. My name never made it to the wall. The kitchen lights were already on. My mother sat at the table in her silk robe sipping from a white mug with the words, "Best Grandma Ever" printed in gold script. She didn't look up when I stepped in. She didn't have to. "Back to play the victim?" she said, eyes still locked on the crossword in front of her. I stood there for a beat, just breathing. Then I pulled out a chair and sat across from her. I didn't touch the coffee pot. I didn't remove my coat. "Did you really think I wouldn't notice?" She sighed and finally looked at me, her gaze calm, bored even. "Kaylin, it was always going to be Leora. She knows how to smile for investors. You're intense. Always have been." I nodded slowly. "You used my work." "You're not exactly a team player," she said, her tone casually cruel. "It's not like you built it alone." "No," I said, "but I built the foundation. You didn't even ask." She smiled faintly like she was humoring a stubborn child. "Because you never understood what legacy means. You were never the legacy, Kaylin. You were the lesson." That line landed like glass shattering in my chest. I kept my voice even. "Show me the original strategy documents." Her eyes flickered just for a second. Then she stood, walked to the side cabinet, and pulled out a thin black folder. She slid it across the table. I opened it. Redacted PDFs, reformatted charts, new headers, clean typography. My name was nowhere. Not in the footer, not in the notes, not in the citations. She watched me scan the pages with the same detached posture she used when discussing old neighbors she never liked. "We cleaned them up," she said. "Investors don't like drama. They want clean narratives." I looked at the corner of one page. The layout was mine. Every margin, every caption, even the spacing between bullet points. I had set that manually. "You rewrote history," I said quietly. She raised an eyebrow. "We refined it." I stood, pushed the chair back gently. "No, you buried it." She said nothing. I left the folder on the table and walked out. My shoes echoed against the hardwood hallway. Through the front door, down the porch steps, into my car. I shut the door, started the engine, then killed it again. For a long moment, I just sat there. My hands were shaking. I placed them on the steering wheel, gripping until my knuckles burned white. My jaw was clenched so tight, I thought something might snap. I reached into my coat pocket, pulled out my phone, typed a message to Madeline. "Pull everything. Legal, media, timeline. I'm done playing polite." I sent it without rereading. Then I opened my encrypted drive, tapped through the layers of folders until I found the one labeled Contingency July. Inside the pitch deck, the original one, time-stamped. Watermarked, charts, email trails, even an early voice memo from my father. I hit play. I know Kaylin built it. His voice crackled through. "But Leora should front it. It's better optics. Kaylin's not brand-friendly." I didn't flinch. I stared at my own reflection in the screen, then minimized the file. The rage wasn't loud anymore. It had cooled, hardened. "They wanted legacy," I whispered to myself, barely audible. "Then let me teach you something about it. First step, redesign the table. Brick by brick, name by name, and not one of them invited." I didn't sleep that night. Not from rage. No, that had already burned out into something sharper. Something surgical. I was done reacting. Now I was calculating. By 8:15 the next morning, I was standing outside the glass doors of the family firm. Same polished lobby, same brass nameplate. The Leora Fund etched in serif letters beneath my father's. No sign of mine? There never had been. The receptionist blinked when she saw me. "Kaylin." I didn't know. She started, then stopped. She glanced at the door badge reader where my name used to light up green. I gave her a gentle nod. "Good morning, Janine." She hesitated, then buzzed the door open. I stepped in. No hesitation, no second glance. The elevator ride up was silent, the kind that lets you hear your own blood move. When I stepped out onto the executive floor, no one greeted me. I didn't expect them to. My heels echoed down the hallway like punctuation. I wasn't headed to the boardroom. I had somewhere better to be. At the end of the corridor, I turned into the client lounge. Now empty. Soft jazz humming from overhead speakers. My attorney Evan was already there. Laptop open, eyes alert. "It's done," he said, sliding a tablet toward me. The screen showed a digital dashboard. Kalen Strategic Holdings LLC. Status active. I tapped into the asset library. Folders upon folders. Every deck. Every algorithm. Every original draft I had ever sent before the so-called merger. "They never paid to license any of this," Evan said, voice low. "You retained rights by default through the holding structure? They didn't read the fine print." I almost laughed. "They never read me, Evan. They just wrote me off." His lips curved. "Then let's show them what they missed." I signed the activation docs. "They built their castle with stolen blueprints," I said. Not to Evan, but to the room, to the walls, to every echo that had ever carried my name in a whisper instead of a credit line. Once everything was logged, I stepped out. We timed it perfectly. Downstairs, I ordered a coffee and took a window seat in the firm's cafe, where I could see the reflection of the boardroom window up above. Evan sent the envelope while I stirred in cream. The delivery man walked in clipboard, in hand, buzzed up, escorted past reception with a polite nod. I watched. Minutes passed. Then came the stir. From my spot, I saw Leora's silhouette rise, saw the flutter of her hands as she opened the envelope. It didn't take long. The panic has a rhythm of its own. Phone calls made mid-meeting, assistants running quiet errands, glances exchanged like currency. I got a text. From Evan. "It landed. They're calling legal." Me. "Let them." Upstairs, I knew what they were reading. Cease and desist. Formal asset freeze. Allegation of IP misappropriation. Demand for removal of all derivative works using protected strategy models. Underneath it all, a time-stamped clause showing that Kalen Strategic Holdings had preemptively registered licensing rights. Years ago. They'd used my designs, my formulas, my structure, dressed them up in Leora's name, and called it a family vision. But it was never theirs to use. In that moment, I wasn't erased. I was unavoidable. Back upstairs, Leora's voice would have cracked. I imagined it. "She owns the foundation tech whispers." Wait, Kalen was the original architect. They scrubbed her. She was the structure. I didn't have to be there to feel it. I sipped my coffee, watching the screen of my phone flicker. Another message. "Evan, investors are calling. They're spooked. They want clarity." Me? Good. Now they listen. I stood up, smoothed my jacket, and walked to the door. Nobody stopped me. I wasn't done because they still thought this was about money. That morning, I didn't get dressed for battle. I dressed like I always do when I mean business. Crisp, structured navy blouse. Jeans, but the kind that say, "I own the meeting." Hair tied back. No makeup beyond lip balm. Just truth, and something stronger. Intention. While the city stirred, I sat at my kitchen counter, sipping lukewarm coffee, waiting for the time to hit. At exactly 9:01 a.m., I clicked send. Oh. The anonymous Dropbox link hit the inbox of Clara Souther, an independent finance blogger with 12,000 loyal readers and no corporate loyalties. Inside the link, my original pitch deck, early-stage email threads, voice memos, sketches, the building blocks of the entire Leora fund, dated watermarked undeniable. I gave her one instruction: verify everything, post what's real. Clara didn't wait. Within 45 minutes, she published the exposé under the headline, "The Real Brains Behind the Leora Fund." It spread like gasoline to flame. By 11:30 a.m., Reddit Finance was in meltdown. Tweets with screenshots of my annotated design mock-ups were being shared faster than the firm's media team could blink. The comment sections told a story that needed no embellishment. One user wrote, "I interned there in 19. We knew. We just weren't allowed to say it. Another added, I always wondered why her name vanished from everything. My inbox became a storm of support apologies and half-confessions. Then came the one message that sent a different kind of chill forwarded from a junior analyst at the firm dated 6 months ago. The sender, Leora. Subject deck revisions. Body strip Kaylin's name and initials from all existing decks and slides. She was the past. Optics matter. It was confirmation of something worse than theft. It was erasure. Intentional. Calculated. I didn't flinch. I didn't even blink. I just kept reading. Because I'd seen the kind of pain they caused when they thought no one would remember. But I remembered everything. And now, the world would too. By early afternoon, the firm scrambled to organize an emergency investor call. They named it a reassurance session, but the headlines were already spiraling. Investors needed to hear that everything was fine. What they got instead was me. I joined the Zoom call using the link forwarded to me anonymously. I didn't disguise my name. When the chime announced Kaylin Bundy has joined the call, the entire panel stiffened. Leora kept her composure. Barely. We appreciate your trust during this time. Our family is committed to transparency and legacy. Legacy, I said. Her jaw tightened. She didn't mute me. Before you continue, I added calm and level. I'd like to read a notarized statement. I held up the letter camera angle steady signed 2 years ago by Gregory Tanaka, the fund's original angel investor. I invested because Kaylin Bundy showed me a model that was lean, disruptive, and visionary. There was no team at the start. There was only her. Silence. Absolute. The kind that's heavier than noise. Then one voice, an older investor I think, murmured, She wasn't the black sheep. She was the shepherd. Leora didn't respond. She blinked slowly, then muted herself. The call ended without a wrap-up. No questions. Just truth. Left suspended in digital air. Later that evening, as the city flickered to life outside my window, the offers started pouring in. A podcast wanted a tell-all interview. A respected fund out of Manhattan asked if I'd consider leading a new division. Even Forbes sent a message asking for an op-ed, but I didn't respond. Not yet. I was still watching the house of cards collapse, and I wasn't done. They tried to erase my name from the future. But they forgot one thing. I still held the keys to everything they built on my back. It was just before noon when we arrived, me, my legal team, and Mr. Renshaw, my father's longtime estate attorney. The boardroom shimmered in sleek glass and steel, but the air was dense. Leora and my mother were already seated, calm, their legs-crossed faces stretched into tight little smiles. They thought this was just another petty stunt, another tantrum from the disappointment daughter. But this time, I didn't come with silence. Let's begin, I said, setting a black folder in front of them. This shouldn't take long. Inside were legal documents, trademark certificates, tech IP filings, copyright claims, the logo of the Leora Family Fund mine, the back-end architecture used in the fund's algorithms designed and coded by my team under a dormant company I had legally resurrected just days prior, the fund's name itself. I had registered it years ago in a quiet corner of Delaware corporate law while they were too busy mocking my spreadsheets. If the firm wishes to continue using the fund's name platform or strategy, I said coolly, a license agreement will be required retroactive with penalties. My mother scoffed. Leora blinked like she'd swallowed her tongue. You're bluffing, she hissed. Mr. Renshaw cleared his throat and pushed his glasses up his nose. She's not. And then he pulled out a second envelope, this one sealed in wax. My late client, your father, left specific instructions regarding Clause 17B to be enacted if, and only if, a breach of familial trust and intellectual misappropriation involving his youngest daughter could be proven publicly. He paused, looked at me. I nodded. He slid the clause across the table. Effective immediately, Kaylin inherits his 40% voting stake in the firm, along with full operational veto powers. Leora paled. He would have told me. He did, I said. You just didn't think it mattered. I didn't need to raise my voice. The silence in that room had already exploded into 1,000 invisible shards. The boardroom phone rang someone's assistant warning that major investors were already dialing in with questions. A few murmured something about needing to reconsider leadership. Leora's lips curled. You think this makes you noble? You could have come to us like family. You mean like you did, quietly rewriting me out of existence. My mother's hand trembled as she reached for her glass. I didn't flinch. I was never your backup plan, I said. I was your insurance policy, and you cashed it too early. Renshaw stood. There's one more matter. 2 paralegals entered the room, each holding a sealed manila envelope. They walked to the head of the table and gently placed them in front of Leora and my mother. You are hereby removed from the fund's leadership effective immediately. The removal is permanent and enforceable under the terms of the original shareholder agreement. Thank you for your service. Leora gasped. This isn't over. I stood, collected my things slowly, then looked her square in the eye. For you, maybe, but for me, I smiled faintly. This is just inheritance, darling. My heels clicked across the floor as I walked out. Behind me, the room erupted into chaos, raised voices, chairs scraping, someone knocking over a pitcher of water. I didn't turn around. Outside, the autumn air was clean, cold, real. I pulled my coat tighter and glanced at the sky. I felt no victory, just stillness. The press cycle died down weeks ago. The lawsuits settled quietly, no headlines, but for me, peace didn't arrive in a courtroom. It walked in on worn shoes, carrying notebooks full of dreams. It was a Wednesday afternoon when we opened the doors. The air inside the converted gallery still smelled faintly of paint and wood polish. A fresh banner hung across the entry. The Parallax Incubator. Founders first. No portraits, no marble plaques, just ideas waiting to breathe. I stood by the front window, watching the first few attendees shuffle in, young, unsure, determined. Some wore hand-me-down suits. Others carried more hope than experience. I saw myself in all of them. I didn't speak at the opening ceremony. Not much anyway. I didn't need to. The work spoke louder. Afterward, as the event eased into quiet clusters of conversation, I stepped out back for air. My assistant followed, tapping gently on the frame. There's a girl who wants to meet you. 19. First gen. She's pitching something about sustainable insulation made from mushroom roots. She's terrified. I smiled. So was I once. We returned inside, and I found her by the snack table fidgeting with a stack of business cards that still had printing errors. She looked up like I was someone important. Maybe I was. Hi, she said. I don't know if I'm even ready. Everyone here's so... You don't have to be perfect, I cut in gently. Just be real. People invest in truth before product. She nodded, and in that nod, I felt something break free in my chest, a release I didn't know I needed. Later that evening, after the room had thinned out and the folding chairs were stacked, a volunteer approached with a sticker. It's just for the media board, she said, handing it over. It read, Kaylin Founder. I looked at it, held it for a moment longer than I needed to. My mind drifted years back to a cold banquet table, a name tag that read, The Family Disappointment. I'd worn it. I'd smiled through it. I placed the new one over my chest. This one fit better. Near the exit, a journalist asked if they could quote me. Any final thoughts, Miss Kaylin? I paused. Legacy is not what you inherit. It's what you refuse to let die. They nodded and walked off. I turned back to help stack the chairs. Days passed. The press came, went. Some stories were flattering, others speculative. I read none of them. Instead, I showed up every morning at the incubator, unlocking the door for kids who reminded me what this was all for. I didn't hear from Leora. Not once. My mother sent a card. No return address? Inside blank? Wah. It sat unopened on my bookshelf for weeks before I tossed it. I didn't need anything from her. Not anymore. I told my therapist I don't forgive them, but I forgive myself for waiting so long for a seat at their table. She nodded. Sometimes silence is the only apology you'll ever get, and the only one that sticks. One evening, after a panel talk, my assistant caught up with me holding a clipboard and her phone. Someone from The Atlantic called, said they're interested in featuring your journey, want to talk to your portfolio manager. I looked up from my notes, tell them I'm busy. They said it's urgent. I'm busy choosing peace, I said, setting my pen down. They can wait. As she turned to go, I glanced across the room. That young founder with the mushroom insulation was laughing with another woman, already sketching their next pitch on a napkin. That was the moment I knew. They had lost the fund, but I had gained something far rarer: clarity. I hadn't built this for revenge. I'd built it so no one else had to fight like I did just to be heard.